Greetings and welcome to the introduction to astronomy. In this week's misconception in astronomy, we are going to talk about galaxies and find out if all galaxies are moving away from Earth. So are all galaxies moving away from us here on Earth? Well, the answer is no. And in general, we look at this, we have what's called Hubble's law, which talks about the expansion of the universe. And that means that all objects in general are getting further away from each other. And that is, as the universe expands, the space between things grows. But that's only the space between very distant galaxies, the emptiness of space that is expanding, and not things, say, within a galaxy. So Hubble's law tells us that galaxies are receding from us, and what it relates is the velocity of the galaxy to its distance. So for a nearby galaxy here, it would not be moving away from us very quickly. For a more distant galaxy, it would be moving very fast and quite quickly away from us here on Earth. But we also want to consider the nearby galaxies. So for distant galaxies, yes, they are all moving away from Earth. We will not find a single really distant galaxy that is moving away from Earth. However, there are cases where galaxies have their own velocities within, say, a star cluster. So let's look at an example of that. And what we might see here in a star cluster is that we might have several different spiral galaxies that are here. And we can draw a few spiral galaxies just to see them. And we can imagine that they are all moving relative to one another. So we can see that they will be moving relative to each other, and they could be going in very different directions. So one could be moving in this direction, perhaps this one could be moving in this direction, and this one might be moving in this direction. Now that means that there is the possibility that within the cluster, for example, that you may find galaxies that are not actually moving away from each other. So galaxies have their own velocity within the cluster, and some may be heading toward our Milky Way. So if this galaxy here is our Milky Way, and here we have another galaxy, say the Andromeda galaxy, they could be moving toward each other. Now Hubble's law would tell us how fast they are moving apart. But because they are nearby galaxies, that velocity is very small. So the individual velocities of the galaxies can overwhelm the Hubble velocity when we're looking at very close objects. And that means that yes, nearby galaxies can be moving in our direction. So this is things like the Andromeda galaxy that is actually moving toward Earth and toward our own Milky Way, and will eventually collide with our Milky Way in several billion years. So there could be a time when we might see something quite like this in our night sky. And here, what do we see? Well, we see our Milky Way here on the right hand side, and we see the Andromeda galaxy on the left. Now that would be the sight as Andromeda gets closer and closer. Right now, Andromeda can be seen with the unaided eye. You can see it, but you have to know right where to look, and it's a slight fuzzy patch, but it is the most distant object you can see without the aid of a telescope. Now, of course, it's 2.5 million light years away. So even traveling relatively fast, even if it could travel at the speed of light, for example, it would take 2.5 million years for it to collide with us. And of course, Andromeda is not moving at anywhere near that speed. It moves at a very tiny fraction of the speed of light, and will take billions of years to actually come close enough. But eventually, yes, the Andromeda galaxy will collide with our Milky Way and form a single much larger galaxy. So let's go ahead and finish up with our summary and take a look at what we've covered here. And what we've looked at is, yes, most galaxies are moving away from us as described by Hubble's law. However, galaxies also have their own random velocities within a cluster, meaning that nearby galaxies, these random velocities can be greater than what is given by Hubble's law, meaning that those nearby galaxies can indeed be moving towards us. So that concludes this misconception on the fact that all galaxies are moving away from us here on Earth. We'll be back again next week for another misconception in astronomy. So until then, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in class.